Okay, guys, I need to spill every detail about last night because it's been looping in my head and I'm still trying to process it. I'm Emma, 20 years old, a college sophomore, juggling classes, a barista job, and life in a cramped apartment. I went to drop off some misdelivered mail to my neighbor Ethan, expecting a quick handoff and maybe a thank you. He's married, totally off limits, and I was just being neighborly. But when he opened the door with that quiet charm and invited me in for a glass of wine, our polite chat turned into something more. The laughter, the confessions, the way we didn't want the night to end, it's got me reeling. Stick with me and please like and subscribe for more stories like this. The evening light was fading, casting a soft orange glow through the hallway of my apartment building as I stood outside my mailbox, sorting through a stack of envelopes. I, Emma, had just gotten home from a grueling shift at Brewed Awakening, the coffee shop where I worked part-time. My apron stuffed in my backpack, its straps digging into my shoulders. My dark hair was pulled into a loose ponytail, strands escaping after hours of steaming milk and wiping counters, and my denim jacket was barely keeping out the October chill. It was 6:45 p.m., and I was bone-tired, my sneakers scuffed from the day, my hands still faintly smelling of espresso and cinnamon. The mailbox, a rusty metal grid in the lobby of our 4-story brick walk-up, was notorious for mix-ups, and as I flipped through my mail bills, a flyer for a yoga studio, a coupon for pizza, I found 3 envelopes that weren't mine. They were addressed to Ethan Carter, apartment 3B, my neighbor across the hall, a utility bill, a postcard from a winery, and a thick letter from a law firm. This wasn't the first time his mail had ended up in my box. The building's ancient mail system seems to have a vendetta against organization. And I'd dropped off stray letters for Ethan before, usually sliding them under his door with a quick note. Ethan and his wife Claire had moved in about 4 months ago, and we'd exchanged small talk in the hallway about the creaky elevator that groaned like it was auditioning for a horror movie, the upstairs neighbor who vacuumed at midnight, or the best coffee spots nearby. I'd argued Brewed Awakening was unbeatable. Ethan was probably in his early 30s with dark blonde hair that fell just a little messy over his forehead, hazel eyes that seemed to notice everything, and a quiet charm that made my cheeks flush before I could stop them. Claire was the opposite, sharp, focused, a lawyer who rushed out in tailored blazers, her blonde bob always perfect, her eyes already on her next case. Ethan's warmth was disarming, his smile lingering a little too long, but I wasn't noticing. He was married, and I was just the college kid next door, juggling psychology classes, a barista job, and rent for a 500-square-foot apartment I was still trying to make my own. I sighed, tucking my own mail under my arm and holding Ethan's envelopes in my hand, the paper crinkling slightly. I could have slid them under his door, but my feet were already moving toward the stairs. A mix of curiosity and neighborly duty. Maybe I'd knock this time, see if he was home. It was the right thing to do, right? I climbed the 2 flights to the 3rd floor, my sneakers thudding softly on the worn beige carpet, the hallway smelling faintly of dust, laundry detergent, and someone's dinner garlic and spices, probably from 3A. I stood outside Ethan's door, apartment 3B, and hesitated, my heart giving a little jump. What if Claire answered? What if I was interrupting something? I brushed the thought aside, took a deep breath, and knocked, the envelopes crinkling in my hand as I shifted my weight. The door opened, and there he was, looking casually perfect in a navy sweater and faded jeans. His dark blonde hair slightly mussed, like he'd been running his hands through it while working. His hazel eyes widened in surprise, then softened with recognition. A smile spreading across his face that made my stomach flutter. Emma? Hey, what's up? I held up the envelopes, managing a smile despite the nervous flutter in my chest. Mail mix-up again. These ended up in my box. He chuckled, reaching for them, his fingers brushing mine as he took the stack. The touch was brief, but it sent a tiny spark through me, like static electricity, and I hoped the dim hallway hid the flush creeping up my neck. "You're kidding," he said, glancing at the envelopes, his thumb tracing the edge of the postcard. "This building's mail system is a nightmare. Thanks for bringing these over. You're a lifesaver." I waved it off, shoving my hands in my pockets to keep them still. "No big deal. Just didn't want you missing your law firm letter or whatever. Looks important." He grinned, his eyes crinkling at the corners, the sound of his laugh low and warm. "Probably Claire's. She gets all the official stuff." He paused, then leaned against the door frame, his gaze lingering on me, warm and a little curious, like he was seeing me for the first time. "You didn't have to come all the way up here. Most people would have just tossed them in the hall." I shrugged, smiling, trying to ignore the way my heart was racing. "I'm not most people. Plus, I was heading up anyway." His smile softened, and he tilted his head, his eyes catching the hallway light. "Still, it's really cool of you. Want to come in for a sec? I've got some wine open, and it's the least I can do to say thanks." I hesitated, my heart giving another jump. Claire's name echoed in my mind, a sharp reminder of the line I couldn't cross. He was married, and I was just dropping off mail. But his smile was so genuine, and the idea of a drink after a long shift sounded too good to pass up. "Isha, I don't want to intrude," I said, my voice betraying a hint of nerves. He shook his head, stepping aside to hold the door open, the warmth of his apartment spilling into the hallway. "No intrusion. Claire's working late at the firm, so it's just me. Come on, one glass won't hurt." My stomach fluttered, but I nodded, stepping inside, my heart racing as he closed the door behind me. His apartment was a mirror of mine in size small, about 500 square feet, but neater, with a leather couch facing a small TV, a dining table with a single unlit candle in a glass holder, and a shelf lined with books and vinyl records. A laptop sat open on the coffee table, a graphic design project glowing on the screen, colorful sketches of logos, probably for a client, with notes scribbled on a nearby pad. The air smelled of red wine, rich and slightly tart, mixed with something faintly woodsy, maybe his cologne or a candle he'd lit earlier. The soft glow of a floor lamp cast warm shadows across the exposed brick walls, giving the space a cozy, lived-in feel. I noticed traces of Clara, framed photo of them at a vineyard, her arm around his waist, both smiling under a clear blue sky. A stack of legal journals on the table, their edges neatly aligned. A pair of sleek black heels by the door, polished and ready for her next rush to the office. My heart twinged, a nudge that I was just the neighbor here for a quick drink and nothing more. But the way Ethan's eyes lingered on me, warm and inviting, made it hard to focus on that line. "Make yourself at home," he said, head into the kitchen nook. A small counter with a bottle of red wine and 2 glasses already out, one half full with a faint lip mark on the rim. "Right okay, or you want something else?" "I've got water, soda, maybe some beer in the back of the fridge." "Red's perfect," I said, perching on the edge of the couch, my backpack sliding to the floor at my feet. My t-shirt was slightly wrinkled from my shift, and I smoothed it self-consciously. Aware of my casual look, black leggings, scuffed sneakers, no makeup, my freckles stark against my skin. My ponytail was fraying, loose strands framing my face, and I tucked one behind my ear, hoping I didn't look as frazzled as I felt after a day of steaming milk and dodging impatient customers. But Ethan didn't seem to care, his movements easy as he poured wine into a clean glass, the deep red liquid catching the lamplight as it swirled. He handed me the glass, our fingers brushing, and I felt that spark again, stronger this time, like a current running through my hand, warming my skin. I took a sip, the wine smooth and slightly tart, with notes of cherry and oak that warmed my throat. "Thanks," I said, smiling up at him, my voice softer than I meant. "This is way better than the instant coffee I'd be drinking at home." He chuckled, settling onto the couch beside me, close enough that our knees were only inches apart, the leather creaking slightly under his weight. "Barista, and you're drinking instant? That's practically a sin." I laughed, rolling my eyes, my cheeks warming under his gaze. "Hey, I'm a broke college student. Instant's my reality. This wine is like luxury level for me." He grinned, his hazel eyes sparkling in the lamplight, the kind of look that made it hard to look away. "Glad I could upgrade you." "You're welcome here anytime. Wine's better than instant coffee any day." The air between us shifted, the quiet filled with the soft hum of the radiator and the distant murmur of traffic outside, muffled by the brick walls and the thick windows. Our eyes met, and for a moment neither of us spoke. The silence heavy with something unspoken, like a thread pulling tighter between us. I took another sip, the wine's warmth spreading through my chest, but it did little to calm the flutter in my stomach. My heart raced, and I tried to focus on the glass in my hands. The smooth curve of it, the way the light caught the red liquid. He was married. I was just the neighbor, but his gaze was warm, searching, like he was seeing me for the first time, noticing the freckles across my nose, the way my fingers fidgeted with the stem of the glass. "So," I said, forcing a lighter tone to break the tension, setting my glass on the coffee table. "How's life across the hall? You and Claire must have this place figured out by now." He shrugged, his smile softening, but there was a flicker of something in his eyes. Tiredness, maybe, or a hint of something heavier, like a weight he carried quietly. "It's good. Claire's always buried in work, so I'm usually the one keeping things together here. Freelance graphic design keeps me tied to my laptop, but it's flexible, which is nice when she's got late nights at the firm." I nodded, sensing the strain behind his words, the hint of a life stretched thin by long hours and separate schedules. "Sounds like a lot. Do you ever get a break?" He chuckled, running a hand through his hair, making it messier in a way that was unfairly charming, the strands catching the light. "Not often. I sneak in some music or a walk to the your cafe actually. Their espresso's my lifeline. Gotta stay sane, you know." I smiled, leaning back slightly, my hand still wrapped around the wine glass, the cool stem grounding me. "Music, huh? Let me guess, classic rock." His eyebrows shot up and he grinned, clearly impressed, leaning forward slightly. "You're good." "Yeah, Springsteen's my guy. You a fan?" "My dad's obsessed. So, I grew up on Born to Run," I said, setting my glass down, the wine leaving a faint warmth in my throat. "What's your favorite?" He took a sip, his eyes never leaving mine, a spark of connection in his gaze that made my pulse quicken. "Thunder Road. Something about it just hits. That feeling of wanting to escape, start over, just hit the road and leave it all behind." I nodded, leaning forward, my elbows on my knees, the couch creaking softly. "Solid choice. It's got that let's get out of here vibe, like you're one guitar riff away from driving off into the sunset." He laughed, his gaze softening, the sound warm and genuine, filling the small space between us. "Exactly. You get it." He paused, then tilted his head, his eyes curious. "What about you? What's your escape from college chaos?" I tilted my head, thinking, the wine loosening my thoughts. "Old rom-coms, mostly. When Harry Met Sally is my go-to. I've watched it at least a dozen times, probably more. There's something about those messy, hopeful love stories that just works." He raised an eyebrow, his smile turning playful, a teasing glint in his eyes. "Rom-coms? Didn't peg you for a hopeless romantic." I laughed, rolling my eyes, my cheeks warming again under his gaze. "Not hopeless. Just hopeful. There's a difference, you know." He grinned, setting his glass down, his eyes locked on mine, the air between us thickening. "Noted. You're full of surprises, Emma." The silence stretched, heavy with something unspoken. The radiator's hum and the faint clink of our glasses, the only sounds. I swallowed hard, trying to keep my voice steady, my heart racing as his gaze lingered, warm and searching, like he was noticing every detail, the way my hair fell loose from my ponytail, the freckles across my nose, the nervous way I twisted the stem of my glass. He was married. I was just the neighbor. But the way he looked at me made it hard to think straight, like the room was shrinking around us, the air growing warmer, heavier. I needed to steer this back to safer ground before my thoughts wandered too far. My eyes drifted to the dining table where the envelopes I'd brought over sat in a messy pile, mixed with other Millmore bills, a few flyers, another postcard. "Your mail's kind of a disaster," I said, forcing a playful tone to break the tension, standing and moving to the table. "Want help sorting it? I owe you for the wine, and I'm basically a pro at organizing chaos." He raised an eyebrow, but his smile didn't fade, and he followed me, setting his glass down. "You're volunteering for chores now. I'm not saying no to that." I laughed, the sound easing the tension, and we started sorting through the mail, his utility bills, Claire's law firm letters, a flyer for a local art show, the winery postcard with a handwritten note on the back. Our fingers brushed as we handed envelopes back and forth, and each touch sending a spark through me like a match-catching flame. We talked as we worked, the conversation flowing effortlessly, his love for graphic design, how he'd once spent all night tweaking a logo for a client who changed their mind at the last minute. My psych classes, how I was fascinated by why people made the choices they did, like why someone might keep a postcard from a place they'd never visit. We laughed about the upstairs neighbor who vacuumed at midnight, the sound echoing through the thin ceiling. And he teased me about my barista skills, claiming I'd probably made better coffee than he did, even with his fancy wine collection. "You're one to talk," I shot back, holding up an expired coupon for a car wash. "This is from last spring. We ever throw anything away?" He chuckled, taking it from me, his fingers grazing mine, lingering just a moment too long, the touch warm against my skin. "Only the stuff I don't need. Keeps life interesting." I laughed, but the air between us shifted again. The silence filled with the soft clink of glasses and the hum of the city outside, the lights of passing cars flickering through the blinds. Our eyes met, and for a moment, neither of us moved. The space between us charged with something unspoken, a pull I couldn't ignore, but knew I shouldn't chase. I focused on the mail, stacking it neatly, but my fingers lingered on an envelope close to his hand, and the warmth of his presence made my heart race. As we sorted, I noticed a loose handle on one of the kitchen cabinets, wobbling every time Ethan opened it to grab a coaster or a napkin. "Your cabinet's about to give up," I said, pointing to it, forcing a lighter tone. "Want me to take a look? I'm no handyman, but I can handle a screwdriver." He chuckled, his eyes crinkling, clearly amused. "You're just full of talents, aren't you? Go for it. I've got a toolbox under the sink." I grinned, kneeling to rummage under the sink, pulling out a small toolbox with a screwdriver and a few loose screws. He stood close, watching as I tightened the handle, my movements careful but a little clumsy under his gaze, my hands hyper-aware of his proximity. "Don't laugh if I break it," I said, glancing up at him, my ponytail slipping over my shoulder. He laughed softly, leaning against the counter, his arms crossed. "No judgment. You're already doing better than me. I've been ignoring that handle for weeks." I tightened the last screw, the handle now secure, and stood, brushing my hands on my leggings, my shoulder brushing his as I stepped back. "There, your kitchen's safe now. You're welcome." He grinned, his eyes warm, locking onto mine. "You're hired. What's next, rewiring the place?" I laughed, the sound easing the tension, but the air felt heavier now, the space between us charged. "Don't tempt me. I'd probably burn the building down." He chuckled, his voice low, his gaze softening. "Your trouble, Emma," he said, teasing but soft, like he meant it in a way that wasn't entirely playful. "Trouble's not always a bad thing," I said, my voice quieter than I meant, the words slipping out before I could stop them. The air thickened, and I swallowed hard, trying to keep my cool, my heart pounding against my ribs. We moved back to the couch, sitting a little closer than before, our knees almost touching, the leather creaking softly. The conversation drifted to our lives, my small town upbringing, where the county fair was the highlight of the year, complete with cotton candy and rickety rides. His college days at a state school, where he'd fallen into graphic design after bombing an engineering exam. A story he told with a self-deprecating laugh that made me smile. We shared stories of our worst dates, mine with a guy who spent an entire dinner talking about his ex. His with a girl who hated rock music, which he swore was a deal breaker. The wine loosened our tongues, and the laughter came easily. But that spark was still there, humming beneath every word, every glance, every accidental brush of our hands. We talked about our favorite books. Mine were psychological thrillers that kept me up late. His were biographies of musicians like Springsteen and Dylan, stories of people who chased their dreams against the odds. I told him about my psych paper on cognitive biases, how I was fascinated by why people clung to certain beliefs. And he shared how he'd once designed a poster for a local band, only to have them reject it for being too bold. We laughed about the absurdity of it all, the wine making the stories funnier, the room warmer, the night stretching on. Eventually, I glanced at my phone. 9 p.m. Time had slipped away. The wine bottle now half empty, the envelopes still scattered on the table, forgotten in the haze of conversation. I knew I should go, but my feet felt rooted, my heart reluctant. I should probably get back, I said, my voice soft, the words heavy with hesitation. I've taken up enough of your evening. He nodded, but his eyes lingered on me, warm and searching, like he wasn't ready for me to leave. Yeah, probably. But this was really nice, Emma. I mean it. My heart fluttered, and I bit my lip, trying to keep my cool, the wine's warmth making it harder to think straight. Yeah, it was. I grabbed my backpack, slinging it over my shoulder, and he walked me to the door, his step slow, like he was stalling. Thanks for the wine, I said, my voice soft, my hand reaching out to touch his arm lightly, a gesture of gratitude that lingered just a moment too long. The touch was electric, my fingers tingling against the soft fabric of his sweater. And our eyes met, warm and searching, the air between us charged with something neither of us could name, a spark that felt dangerous and thrilling all at once. Thanks for the mail, he said, his voice low, his gaze softening like he was trying to hold on to the moment. You're kind of amazing. My heart raced and I swallowed hard, trying to keep my voice steady, the wine and his words making my head spin. Anytime, Ethan. You know where to find me. I stepped into the hallway, the cool air, a shock after the warmth of his apartment, but I couldn't resist one last tease, needing to lighten the moment before it consumed me. Next time I'll expect a full dinner spread. Maybe some of that pizza from your flyers. He grinned, leaning against the doorframe, his eyes never leaving mine, the lamplight catching the hazel in them. Deal. See you around, Emma. As he closed the door, I walked across the hall to my apartment, my heart pounding against my ribs, the wine's warmth lingering in my veins. The memory of his touch, his smile, his voice stayed with me, a spark we both felt. When I knew we shouldn't chase but couldn't quite forget. Thanks for listening to my confession, guys. I hope you felt that spark as much as I did. If you loved this story, please like and subscribe for more.